Hi, I'm Jesse Leet, and what's that, Tej? Not this kind of conference. Not enterprise. But Prime had said, take it up with Karen. Oh. Okay. No, I'm not. No, I'm not coming back to the startup. Prime, I've told you. Listen, I'm done, okay? No, I'm done. All right. You can't pay me enough. Honestly. So I guess it's just us now. Hi, I'm Jesse Leet. Want to talk about Vim macros? So who's this talk for? Maybe you're an absolute beginner and you have very little experience with Vim macros, or maybe you're coming over from another editor like VS Code, or maybe you're coming over from that other editor wondering what makes Vim users so loyal to their cause. Imagine you have a tedious edit you have to perform on a whole bunch of files, but then also imagine you could create a little clone of yourself to do the code monkey work for you. And I'm here to tell you macros can do that for you.
How neat is that? That's pretty neat.
So what is a macro? A macro simply allows you to record keystrokes on the fly. And these keystrokes are stored to a register for future playback. Let's take a look at a few examples. So let's say I have the shopping list and I want to convert these items into a checklist. I can run one of my macros on it. Or let's say I have this list of some of my favorite novels and I want to convert it to JSON for a project that I'm working on. Or let's say I've got some PHP. PHP's not dead, by the way. And I have these anonymous closure functions and I want to convert them into shorthand arrow functions.
What? Wow.
So obviously you can see how handy these things are, but I'm moving pretty fast, so let's slow it down a little bit. How do you record one of these macros? So to record a macro, first you hit Q to record the keystrokes to a register. So then you have to select a register. So QA would record to the A register. And then you hit Q to stop recording again. Say we take our shopping list example. I'm going to undo those changes. Let's record it together. So I'm going to hit Q to record. Then I'm going to hit Q again. You can see I'm recording to the Q register. By the way, that's pretty common. Instead of having to record to, let's say, the A register or the B register and select another key, your finger's already there. Just double tap Q. So Q to record. And now I'm going to go to insert mode and we're going to add that checklist item. Hit escape to go back to normal mode and then hit Q to stop recording. So now to play it back. To do this, we hit the @ symbol to play back keystroke from a register. So @A would play back keystrokes from the A register. In our case, we were recording to Q, so we'll hit @Q. You can also hit @@ to play back the previously played macro, which is really handy. So again, at our list, I'm going to move down to the next item. I'm going to hit @Q. And there's our first mistake. And that brings me to my first tip. Anytime you switch lines, it's a good habit to get into to go to the beginning of the line so that your macro is not dependent on where your cursor is when you start. So let's undo that. And let's re-record. So I'm going to hit QQ to record again. First, we're going to hit caret to go to the beginning of the line this time. I'm going to go back into insert mode, add my checkbox, hit escape, Q to quit recording, and let's try again on the next line. So I'm going to run that again with @Q. That's what I'm talking about. So it doesn't matter where I am on this line, @Q is still good. And again, if you hit @, that'll run the previously played macro. Another little trick that you can do is if you select multiple lines, you can go :norm and then @Q, and this will run @Q in normal mode on all of these lines separately. I actually find that one really handy. So I have two custom mappings that I use to run macros quickly across lines like this. This first one, Q in normal mode, Vim and NeoVim have two slightly different implementations of what Q does. But what I've mapped it to do is @Q. I'm always recording to the Q register anyway, so I just have it play back what's in my Q register, QQ to record, and then @Q to play it back. This way I don't have to like shift 2 to get my @ symbol. I just Q. And then J just to move down to the next line. You'll see in a minute we'll be talking about recursive macros where you can work that into your macro. But often if you're just doing a really quick on the fly thing, it can be really handy to just move down to the next line so you can spam it. So for example, if I undo some of this and I just hit Q, I can spam it and you'll see that the cursor is always starting on the next line. And then this next mapping here is a visual select mode mapping where Q will run that normal command across all of the lines. So again, that is if I select multiple lines, I can Q across all of them really quickly. And before we move on, if you come across a pain point, don't be afraid to make a custom mapping. It's your config.
Stop thinking about what I want, what he wants, what your parents want. What do you want?
What do you want? What I want is to teach you more about macros. So we're going to undo this and we're going to record that from scratch, but this time using a recursive macro. So QQ to record. I'm going to go to the beginning of the line with caret, even though I'm already at the beginning of the line. We just want to get into that habit of doing that. I'm going to insert that new checkbox. Hit escape to go back to normal mode. I'm going to go down to the next line. And then before I quit recording, I'm going to @Q to set up the next playback. So @Q, and then hit Q to stop recording. And now if I @Q on this next line, you'll see that it recursively runs through and plays all the way through the list. Sometimes your mileage may vary. Sometimes you'll get to the end of the list and it'll do funky things depending on what kind of content is at the end of your file. But recursive macros can be really handy nonetheless. Now I can just see my VS Code friends saying, but what about multiple cursors? I can do all this with multiple cursors. And with this example, you're right. You could do this with multiple cursors. But I think with the next few examples, you'll see how much more powerful Vim macros are. So for example, let's say we wanted to take this list. I'm going to undo this again. And we wanted to make an ordered list by number. So the first thing we need to do is add a 1 to the first item. Then we're going to start recording on the second item. So QQ to record. We're going to go to the beginning of the line. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to now go up and we're going to copy this number and paste it down onto the next line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yank and find the space. You can see that I basically yanked from the 1 through the space just up until the B. I'm going to go down and I'm going to hit Shift P to paste it before the first character. And then we're going to go back to the beginning of the line and we're going to Control A to increment that number. And there's our macro. So if I hit Q, stop recording, and again, now as I play this back, you'll see that it increments the number with each playback. So that's something that you couldn't do with multiple cursors. So before we get to our last example, let's just recap. Why macros? Macros allow you to easily repeat tedious changes or operations. Macros are more powerful than multiple cursors in other editors. And they're as simple or complex as you want them to be. But we haven't talked about the most underrated reason yet. The most underrated reason, in my opinion, is you can save macros to functions for later use. Let's take a look at one more example, that PHP example I showed earlier where we convert this anonymous closure into a shorthand arrow function. So the first thing I'm going to do is start recording. We're going to go to the beginning of the line. Then I'm going to find the function. I'm going to clear my highlighting just because I don't want to see the highlighting when I'm playing back the macro. We're going to change that to FN. I'm going to find the closing bracket. We're going to delete all this variable scoping after because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to add the fat arrow in there. We're going to join up, remove the return. Then we're going to go to the end, get rid of that semicolon, join up, and lastly, get rid of the curly. I'm going to stop recording. Let's undo that and test it out. So works good. And finally, we're going to create a mapping for this so that we can use it later on. Now I've created a plugin for this. You don't necessarily need a plugin, but I find it easier to yank the macro from the register because then you don't have to escape any term codes. You can just plop it directly into your mapping. So here we're going to create a macro mapping. A normal mapping is good. I'm going to map it to leader PC for PHP closure. And then before we paste it in here, I just want to point out that you should probably use remap true because that way the macro will behave more as if you're running it manually. So then what we're going to do is we're going to run yank macro from the plugin. I'm going to pass in register Q. It says that it's ready to paste in, so we'll just paste it right in and we'll save that. Let's go back to our file and test it out. So leader PC, there we go. So to recap, you always got to try to think repeatable. Always start with the caret to ensure the beginning of line. Try to avoid HJKL motions. You never know how long a line is going to be or where you're going to be when you're switching lines. So using motions like F or your slash search is just going to be a little bit more accurate. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. And finally, thank you, NeovimConf. A special thank you to Justin, Prime, Tej, Adam, and all of you awesome people in the NeoVim community. And if you like this talk, I've been chipping away at a Vim course called Vim for Normal People. You can sign up at vimfornormalpeople.com. And if you have a special insert person in your life, you can sign them up too. And here's where you can find me on the internets: Twitter, GitHub, and my website. Thank you so much. Bye.